Well, not the prettiest day in Florida, but better than it was, a week or so ago when the hurricane was coming through. And apparently, we might have another hurricane coming through. So that's the news for Florida for this week. And I'm down here on Saturday morning trying to get this video out for Sunday. I was supposed to edit the video for Val's car last night, which I'm not going to show too much of it from here. But we've gotten a bunch of stuff done on that car. And instead of editing last night, I fell asleep. Picked up my youngest from her gymnastics class at 8 o'clock because she has gym every weekday from 4 to 8. Life of a competitive gymnast. But anyways, I was just tired from the rest of the week, and maybe I'll get home early enough today to edit that and get it out. But maybe this video comes out before the video on Val's car, and I'll edit Val's car video next. The Cutlass video has got to come out on Sunday. It's just got to. Anyways, let's get to work on this thing. All right, so for the Cutlass today, I want to get the cross member that the rack is going to mount to, or the rack will be close to mounting to. Not 100% sure it'll be there just yet. And then I want to get the bars that are going to go from here up to that cross member. So originally when this car was put together, I know about where the rack was. And it was in a really good location for the bump steer and all of the important front suspension geometries, let's say that. So that, I didn't have, as the car lifted up, the front tires didn't want to point in or point out, because that takes some effort, which you'll see in the video on Val's car. It took some effort to get all that scienced out, but I've got an idea of where it needs to go on this car, and I'm actually going to use my TRZ lower control arms to mock that up, because I know basically about how far ahead of them my the rack originally used to mount. And then I'm going to measure the oil pan to make sure that I think it's going to clear the oil pan. Ideally, I'd be mocking it up in there before I put the cross member. Maybe I'm going to regret this later down the road. We'll see. But I'm going to do it in a way that I think I'll be able to move the rack around a little bit if I need to. So, rather than talking about it, let's be about it. Get some stuff done. Because we got a race coming up pretty soon. Wish I was down there racing at FL2K today. All right, here we go. Well, first time lapse in this video, actually only going to be 2, but wanted to kind of just take you guys along for the process here. And you can see I mocked up the TRZ control arm. I actually just used a piece of filler rod to kind of position it about where I think I think that's pretty close to its full droop, but I will probably at some point need to stop and mock up the upper control arm, as well as put the spindle in, so that I can actually move the front suspension through its travel to make sure that the things that I'm remembering actually match up with reality as far as the measurements go. So I'm breaking out the laser here to kind of get an idea of how far down this front hoop needs to bend. And I end up deciding to put it back on the stock part of the frame rather than out on the tubular part that I've put on. And that's kind of for a couple of reasons. One, it's because of the mid plate is going to tie in there, so that's going to be an ultra strong part of the car, as well as there's going to be bars that connect to the frame to the front motor plate and to the bars that triangulate the front of the chassis up to the dash bar area on the main part of the roll cage. So next video or two will probably be cutting out the firewall, since it's shot anyways. We'll end up cutting some of that out to go ahead and get in there and put these bars in, and then we'll just refit the firewall around it. And my plan is to have the firewall somehow bolt together to where I can peel off the roof, the window frame, the lower door supports, and have the firewall actually powder coated with the bottom of the chassis. Still going to be a stock firewall, but instead of it being one piece and welded together under the windshield, I'm just going to have to work out some kind of way to bolt that together, put a flange in there, maybe make it over, maybe make the old firewall overlap with the new piece of firewall that I have, so that way I can you know, make it to where it's removable. And that kind of stuff really adds a lot of time and trial and error with the, you know, the build process, because you're trying to do things that they just take a lot of time to execute properly. So anyways, got the bar bent, and the bottom side of the frame rail here is both curved down, as well as there's an overlapping joint there from where the two halves of the frame rail get put together and welded. So it's a hand fit with the grinder to make it all fit right. And then on top of that, we want to make sure that it's level. So then I get the height set, get the level out, and I'm just nibbling away at the fitment on one side. Well, it's on the driver's side, to tuck that up a little bit higher so that I can get that bar level. And, you know, trying to keep all those bars perfectly level with each other, like all the horizontal bars, keep them horizontal. And there's a couple of them that, through the process of welding and stuff, they're off 1/10 of a degree here and there, and it annoys me. But without a chassis jig, this is where we're going to be. It takes a lot of effort to really get all of them squared up and to keep them square. But as long as your suspension points, especially in the rear, as long as they all stay square and true to the direction the car is headed, we'll be in good shape. And, you know, when it comes to, like, there's a lot of bars around the control arm attachments at the back of the car, similar to Val's car. Lots of triangulation going on back there. Lots and lots of maybe even a little bit of extra bars that don't need to be there. But in doing that, we're keeping all that square so the car will go nice and straight. All right, well, I think I say that a lot too, don't I? But there's a welded in cross member, I guess you could call it. And my measurements put the rack somewhere in here. It ends up being about, I think about 1 inch ahead of the balancer. And there is where the balancer is going to be, somewhere right about in there. So the idea is the rack will be somewhere in here. The arms will go back to the spindle. And then the motor mount, or the motor plate, is going to basically be flush with the front of this here. So if my measurements work out right, what I'll probably do is put a threaded nut in here, like drill a hole in here, weld a threaded insert, and then there'll be a bar that comes off of here and goes up to the diagonal bar. So that diagonal bar is going to come down, land somewhere in here behind the radiator, and then, you know, it'll angle up, and then somewhere in here, bar down, and then another insert to where the motor plate will go to. And then the radiator will sit probably on top of this bar. I'll build some little cups with some pads in it so it isolates the vibration from the radiator. turbo placement and stuff, haven't exactly figured out yet. Hey, that's still warm. And I don't know what it is they put inside of the frames. It's probably years of dust and oil and all kinds of stuff. But when you start welding on it, actually, after the camera died, I welded a little bit more on the lower seam, welded the lower control arm. But when you get that stuff hot and burning, it stinks. It stinks a lot. But the next step is to make our bar that's gonna go here. And I'm gonna let it just run into this bar at an angle. And then there will probably be a bar that comes forward off of that, probably. I don't know yet. But the idea is this is gonna be the bar that takes an impact. If you saw it with the, that bar is already a little bit lower than the frame. About half a bar thickness lower. So if the car comes down from a wheelie, it's gonna hit that as well as the bars. The idea is that it kind of hits all of it, and then with it having the vertical support in from the top, you know, and then it's got this 1/8 inch piece of plate here, the big thick factory frame. The idea is that it will not fold up. Things can get crazy when you stand one up on the bumper, but with today's technology, hopefully we will avoid a giant bumper standing, bumper dragging, rear bumper dragging wheelie, and then the car comes smashing down and wrecks the whole front end. Hopefully we can avoid that with, you know, laser sensors and pitch sensors and throttle pedal. You guys have seen me stand Soccer Mom up a few times. I was able to bring her down with just a little bit of little foot wheelie control. Right there. Oh, we're wheeling. Ah! And it's hard to, I've actually had a couple of pretty big wheelies with a G-body that I drove for TRZ Motorsports years ago. Kind of bailed out too much because the turbo car, whenever you crack the throttle, it dumps the blow-off valves, which dumps all the boost, dumps all the power, and then it just comes slamming down. So you have to kind of just crack it real quick and just hope that the power doesn't lose too much power on its way down. Because if you lose all the power, the thing just smashes down and hurts your back for one. Speaking of hurting backs, mine's bothering me after that. Twisting and... Ooh. Anyways, let's get these other two bars bent up. I already know they need to be a 15-degree angle. And then my plan is to kind of half notch them so that they'll fit up into here. So that's going to be something. I haven't exactly figured out how I'm gonna do that yet, but we're about to figure it out right now. So here we go. All right, so let's jump off into the last time lapse of this video, and we're gonna mock back up that control arm again. Just use a piece of welding wire tied around the castle nut on the ball joint and then wrapped it around the frame, and then go fire up the Rogue Fab bender again. See if we can bend up a piece of 1 5/8" tubing is what I'm using for these lower frame rails, as well as that cross member. And on the, when it comes to any tube bending, if you guys didn't already know this, whenever you bend it, like say you sweep it to where it is bent, let's just use 90 degrees for an example. That tube will spring back when you release the tension on the bender, and so the tube that you just bent to 90 degrees will no longer be 90 degrees. And depending on the thickness of the wall of the tubing, as well as the outside diameter of the tubing, that will kind of determine the spring rate. Chromoly seems to bounce back more than mild steel. Thicker chromoly bounces back even more than thin wall chromoly. At least that's been my experience, to where like on this bender with 1 5/8" 083 chromoly, to make a 90 degree bend, I basically need to bend the tube 97 degrees and then when I release the bender, it will spring back to right at 90 degrees, give or take a tenth. So that number kind of correlates where you can work it out to where at 45 degrees, it's going to be less of a spring back than that. And then at 15 degrees, well, I wanted to get a 15 degree bend, so I bent it to like 17.5-ish degrees. And then that got me pretty much where I needed to go. So, a lot of jibber jabber. Hopefully you guys like the tech information. And I probably should have cut out a little piece here because I couldn't find the tool to release the hole saw on the bender, because we had the large hole saw in the notcher for making valves, lower control arms in the front, and I couldn't find the right tool. So found the right tool, got it notched, got it flipped back over to 1 5/8 on the notching stuff, and now you can kind of see what I want to accomplish, and that is to land the bar at a 15-degree angle on the front hoop that we just welded in, as well as get it notched up part of the way into the tubing that is on the back of the frame there. So kind of mess around with this for a little bit, grind on it on the front of the lower control arm attachment to make sure that I can kind of get everything in order there. And as I get towards the end of this and start getting it fitting better, I decide I want to pause for a little bit and maybe change it around a little bit. But that's going to require me cutting out the temporary cross tube that was holding the frame at its correct width, and then installing the front or the upper control arm along with the spindle on the driver's side to kind of sweep it through its travel, make sure everything's cool there, as well as figure out how I'm going to do the back and sweep it up into the frame. Well, I have run out of time, but you can at least see kind of what I'm going for there. And before I finalize this, I want to do some more measuring. One, to see if I can tuck this up any more back here. You can see I kind of got a double joint thing there going on, which that's kind of what I had planned for. And then I'm gonna cut a little piece of tubing that's bent to fill that in, and then it'll kind of be right in line with that. That'll be kind of just a piece that's more, it's not really for structures, just to make it look nicer. But what I want to do is also put the upper control arm and the spindle in and make the thing go to full droop, like where it's going to end up when the shock is fully topped out, and make sure that we have clearance right in here. Now I think I've got plenty, but I want to double check that, as well as I want to make sure that I've got room for my oil pan down here in this area. I think the oil pan's up above it. If I'm planning on this being so this will be about 3.5 inches off the ground at race ride height. That's the plan anyways. So if I do that there, and then I've got the oil pan, I know how far it sticks down from crankshaft center line. I'm going to try to get my crankshaft center line somewhere between 10 and 12 inches off the ground. I think that ought to be a good number for where this car is going to end up with where the rest of the weight will be. So, unfortunately, that's going to wrap up this video. So I've got to get back home. Got some responsibilities there. So, hopefully I get this video edited for Sunday, and you guys will see it then. So I can't thank you all enough for watching and following along. It's pretty cool to see all the comments and views Like, for people watching me build my own personal car that I've literally had since I was 14 or 15 years old. And now I'm pushing 44. So, wow, that's pushing near 30 years I've had this car. Is that math right? I got it between when I was, no, because I would have been 13. So basically 29 years I've had this car. Because we got it, I think, the summer I turned 14. And then it was kind of a slow project with my dad and I tinkering with it and getting it to where I could drive it to school. But anyways, that'll wrap it up for this video. Thanks again for watching. See you guys next time. Bye.